After the complete annihilation and decimation of Ukraine, its people, and its infrastructure over the past couple of years, and this has been going on prior because the war in Ukraine has been going on since 2014, since the Maidan coup. What I want to talk about most about this is rebuilding Ukraine. Rebuilding Ukraine is going to be huge, not only for the people of Ukraine, but for the people that do it because they will make so much money. And here we see that along with rebuilding Ukraine's infrastructure and its institutions, what you need first to do that is people to create the plan. And after you create the plan, what you need next is institutional investors. And these are the same institutional investors that are the people that fund the lobbying class in the United States, that then fund the politicians and give them their talking points. These are the same corporations that are now also going to be making immense amounts of profit off of the nations that are being decimated from the wars that are being sold by the politicians who are lobbied by the corporations that pay their salary and pay their lobbying fees. This is beyond interesting. Let's go ahead and jump in and see what we've got. From CNN Business. CNN, never really a source I would go to for full-on credibility and non-biased reporting, but what's so cool about CNN Business is a lot of times you're not receiving the same political slant that you would from the apparatchiks on the corporate news. These are very much people that cover the business and financial sector. They cover the economy a lot of times, and they are very much more objective in their reporting in many instances. There's still very much a subjective lens that's applied, and you can filter through it and read it and see it in real time. But the thing is, when you're going through many of the things through CNN Business on occasion, it doesn't feel like full-on propaganda for one side. It does feel like they are delivering you the information with a slight tilt. Whereas it feels like you're being delivered a full tilt of information and then they're obfuscating many other things when you listen to the corporate press as a whole. Let's go ahead and get into this. Ukraine's long-awaited push to liberate territory held by Russia may have gotten off to a slow start, but the country is already planning for its future after the war and turning to private investors for help. Like I said, JP Morgan, BlackRock. In the future, I'm wondering if State Street and Vanguard will jump in or any other massive institutional investors, because it's going to be so profitable for the restructuring of that country, as well as the fact that they're going to be in so much debt, which is going to collapse their currency, because they're not only going to have to pay us back, they're going to have to pay back all the other countries that are financing their fight against Russia. We've effectively given them $200 billion. And in that, we've given them more than double what the Russians spend on their military in a year. What the Russians spent on their military in 2022, I believe, was roughly $85 billion. We have easily eclipsed that with Ukraine. And if you want to add all the funding from all the NATO countries, absolutely. Ukraine has absolutely, undoubtedly, and unequivocally eclipsed that margin. So, more than 400 global companies pledged to support Wednesday for rebuilding the war-torn country at Ukraine's recovery conference in London. What we see is that the firms have signed up to Ukraine's business compact, signaling that their intent to boost investment in the country. The UK government has also set out a package of support for Ukraine, including $3 billion of new guarantees to unlock World Bank loans and $240 million or $305 million of bilateral assistance. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said at a conference that the United States would send an additional $1.3 billion in financial assistance to Ukraine to overhaul its energy grid and modernize other critical infrastructures. Ukrainian people face an enormous fundraising challenge, and it's one of the government's developed finance institutions won't be able to meet to help with private investors. The World Bank estimated in March that the cost of rebuilding the country 1 year on from the start of the war amounted to $411 billion, a huge figure that is set to increase as the conflict drags on. And why is the conflict dragging on? This is something that people like those at CNN Business will not tell you because they're obfuscating some of the information. The reason the conflict is dragging on is because NATO is incentivizing it and so is the West. There was a plea deal made with Boris Johnson where there was going to be a meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, and they were going to make an amends and they were going to stop the fighting and end the war and come to an agreement. But Boris Johnson that week flew to Ukraine to go see Volodymyr Zelensky and told him, no, don't take the deal. We'll fund and finance you to the end of time. And that's effectively what's going on, because if we want to make this will be nothing more than another forever war, just like Afghanistan was, and we are going to do the same thing that we did ourselves then. We're going to spend ourselves dry, we're going to blow ourselves out economically, completely deplete the value of our currency by spending trillions of dollars in a place that's 6,500 miles away from the border that you call home, And what we're going to do is we're going to devalue the currency that you operate under, destroy your economy, just like we're destroying that nation as it's torn apart through war and it's decimated and its people cast astray, causing another migrant crisis, much like we did with the Middle East, which ended up leading to Brexit. So let's go to the Hill. It says Zelensky agrees to let Ukraine be rebuilt through investment with BlackRock CEO. And this is just another quick article covering this. It says BlackRock CEO Larry Fink and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky agreed to coordinate investment efforts to reconstruct Ukraine during a video conference this week. This was done in November. This article is a bit old, but I wanted to talk about this because JP Morgan Chase is now recently coming into the fold. So it says Zelensky's office made the announcement on Wednesday. It came after Ukrainian Economic Ministry signed a memorandum of understanding in November for BlackRock to provide advisory support for designing an investment framework. Volodymyr Zelensky and Larry Fink agreed to focus in the near term on coordinating the efforts of all potential investors and participants in the reconstruction of our country, channeling investments into the most relevant and impactful sectors of the Ukrainian economy. A readout of the call came from Zelensky's office states. So that is actually a quote from the call itself. It says, Volodymyr Zelensky and Larry Fink agreed to focus in the near term on coordinating efforts to all potential investors. As I said, future potential investors. Look to people like State Street and Vanguard. Zelensky previously spoke with Fink in September, and Kiev also indicated some BlackRock leaders will visit Ukraine next year. BlackRock spokesman Mark Bubeck deferred comment on the company's announcement of the Memorandum of Understanding last month. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into human events. This is something that's run by, I believe it's Jack Posobiec. So here we see BlackRock JP Morgan set up reconstruction bank for Ukraine. And I'm wondering what else is going to come to the fold and how much Ukraine's currency is going to be completely destroyed. BlackRock and JP Morgan Chase are reportedly aiding the Ukrainian government in setting up reconstruction banks that could see rebuilding projects being heavily invested in by private entities. The Financial Times noted that would cost Ukraine roughly $411 billion to rebuild the country amid the onslaught of attacks by Russia, but the cost is contributing to increase. I actually had that Financial Times article up, but I read it last night, and then when I went to read it again this morning so I could go over it again, it had actually been sitting up so long that they told me I needed a subscription, and I'm not going to give money to the Financial Times. Sorry. The Ukrainian Development Fund is still in early stages of setting up Reconstruction Bank, but potential investors will get inside preview of how things will look during a London conference that is set to take place this week. With a steep cost to rebuild, the Ukrainian government reached out to BlackRock in November to see if there was a conceivable way of attracting investments. JP Morgan was soon added in February. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed last month that he was working with two financial institutions and consultants at McKinsey, per the report. Philip Hildebrand, BlackRock Vice Chair, said so many of today's long-term challenges are best addressed through blended finance, and this is one of them. You need these vehicles to mobilize capital at scale. And blended finance is just effectively pulling in revenue sources from multiple different ways, through grants, through funding, through different lobbying organizations and all of that. It's just a way to say we're extrapolating money from multiple different processes of being able to actually allocate capital. So, through BlackRock and JP Morgan are offering their services, they will likely have the first look at potential investments, which means they will likely have the most return capital that they will make. Investments in the Eastern European country. The report noted that the current development has only deepened JP Morgan's relationship with its long-standing client Ukraine. The financial institutions have helped Ukraine raise more than $25 billion in sovereign debt since 2010 and has led the country $20 billion debt reconstruction in 2022. What is the debt threshold that is going to be achieved when Ukraine officially has to pay back all of these nations? It's got to be the sum of something like almost $1 trillion, because if we actually are going to push this war to the degree, let's say we continue to finance Ukraine all the way to up until the point of the 2024 presidential election, and then 2025, someone comes in and ends it. And we'll just say this, that like someone comes in, they announce that they're ending the war day one, or they're going to go over there and they're announcing a ceasefire because they're demanding one, and they're going to have a conversation and a sit down with people like Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Volodymyr Zelensky, and Xi Jinping needs to be talked about this because he's someone who's trying to finance Russia right now, and as well as realistically giving them an option to pay for their payment outside of the SWIFT payment system, which is a major factor that the United States government is going to want to be talking to people like China about. Or they're just going to talk to Russia about it and completely backhand China and completely make them backslide and say, no, come back to our system, come back to the SWIFT payment system, abandon China, come back to the new liberal world order. So, through BlackRock and JP Morgan as are offering their services, they will likely be the first at potential investments. And like I said, the first potential investments will be the first people who will really make massive sums of money off of the restructuring and rebuilding, because they're going to be the ones who are getting paid back first. BlackRock has claimed that Ukraine needs a development finance bank that would provide the country with infrastructure, climate, and agricultural opportunities. This will apparently make them more attractive than other long-term investors, which, as we've said, State Street and Vanguard. JP Morgan was added to the venture due to its debt expertise. Stefan Weiler, JP Morgan's head of debt capital markets in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, said the fund is being set up to also give public and private sectors investors the opportunity to invest in specific projects and sectors. There will be different sectorial funds, and the funds identified as priorities for Ukraine. That aim is to maximize capital participation. So, when they say maximize capital participation, I'm wondering what they mean solely in the fact of who are they maximizing it for? However, it does not appear that Ukraine is expected to receive such cash investments until the end of the conflict with Russia. So, who knows how long that will be? Again, God knows how much money people will have continued to send Ukraine to fight Russia. Meanwhile, we're sending them cluster munitions currently, when this was announced by the Biden administration that the use of cluster munitions by the Russian army would have been an act of war. But we're funding them with these actual weapons. This is insane. Also, if you don't know the danger of cluster munitions are things that we left all over places in the Middle East, as well as some in Vietnam, and people would find them and they actually wouldn't explode. And then upon toying with them or tampering with them or even not doing so, they would have laid latent for years. And then they would explode out of nowhere, causing havoc and mayhem, many a times killing and maiming innocent people. And that's just not the people that they were even intending to kill when they dropped these. Also, cluster munitions, in the process of killing the people that they do, 90% of the people that they kill when cluster bombs are dropped are civilians, which is why they should be outlawed. They should not be used in any conventional warfare, and was why it was actually stated that the use of cluster munitions from the Russian government and the Russian military was a war crime, because you would be killing 90% Ukrainian civilians. But it's okay, it's perfectly fine if we're funding it. However, it does not appear that the Ukraine is expected to receive such investments until the end of the conflict with Russia. And I have to read this again, and I have to make this point. They will not receive it until the end of the conflict. How long is that going to be? Even if we just go all the way into 2025, just to the point of the day when the president is elected and they're saying, no, we need to make sure that we're announcing a ceasefire and people can have a conversation and come to the table and act like adults. How much money will have been spent on Ukraine trying to bleed Russia dry? And in the process, we will have bled the Ukrainian people dry, as well as the beauty and the soul of that nation, because we will have been sending their children and their sons to go die in war. Meanwhile, we could have stopped this when Boris Johnson went over there and told them no. It says Russian President Vladimir Putin, during a meeting with the African Union, revealed that Ukraine has allegedly signed a treaty in the spring of 2022, but the country went back on it after Russia had agreed on its terms. And this is actually the treaty that I was just referencing with Boris Johnson, that he went over there after one was supposed to be signed between Russia and Ukraine. This was going to be instituted at an African Union summit, and then Boris Johnson told Volodymyr Zelensky, no, we will finance you till the end of time. And with that comes the death of the Ukrainian people and the persecution of their liberty and the loss of so many innocent lives. And there will only be more lives lost if we continue to fight and use this land as nothing more than a place to completely decimate, as an abattoir for us to bleed Russia dry. That's all I've got for this. Thanks for watching this far if you got this far. Give it a like if you liked it. A thumbs down if you didn't. Tell someone you love them. Stay great. Stay lovely. Peace out.